special meeting to discuss the Cheney's comprehensive plan. So I want to kick it off with Todd, if you want to get us going here.
Certainly.
Hopefully some more folks will show
Yeah,
up.
as they're coming in, I know that we have a few more people that said they're going to be late, so they'll be showing up a little bit later. But yeah, tonight, this is just a workshop to really facilitate discussion on the plan. It's open to the public, but it's not a public hearing, so we're not taking public comments tonight. But we will have that opportunity over the next year to kind of comment as we roll out the plan. And basically, it'll be coming probably as an updated report every month with the Planning Commission, and then every once in a while for informational item with the City Council as we move through the chapters. But tonight, we've done a lot of analysis. We've done a survey. We've interviewed staff, some of the public. We've held meetings. The last workshop group, we actually did some scenarios. We got together and drew some pictures and everything. But tonight is just to facilitate the discussion of what our options are, what our scenarios are, what we're recommending as a scenario. And then once we kind of get a consensus of this is the way we want to go, then we give it back to Nexus and they start cranking all the numbers and starting to develop the plan. And then over the next year, obviously it was the comprehensive plan was due in June of 2026. They have pushed that to December of 2026. So we have a little over a year to develop this plan. So as we move forward, there's just a few things that I'll do, and then I'm going to give it to Ryan. Tonight we have Ryan Hughes and Curtis Johnson here tonight to present on what you're seeing. You have a copy of the plan and then also a copy of the PowerPoint. So just the very first, this is the way I like to read the first paragraph and the last. We're going to take a look at what we call the future land use map, the FLUME, acronym the FLUME. The scenario that we have in place, that kind of sets what we call housing over the next 20 years, growth units. And then the very last conclusion right through here. So I will move, read that. But anyway.
Y'all can read that, right?
It's not working. Is it on? Oh.
And just as a note, while you're working on that, just this is early on in the process of developing our comprehensive plan. So there's going to be a lot more community outreach, a lot more discussion, a lot more analysis. Just good to start this process early so that we don't miss anything and we get as much feedback as we possibly can from the community.
Yeah, just it highlighted as far as the introduction, talk a little about 3 scenarios and the recommended scenarios that we came up with. And then on the very end, basically this is just the starting point. Once we start that, we're gonna take whatever that scenario is, we're gonna move forward with it. We'll have a lot of public process in it. Things might change and it may not. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce Ryan. I believe he's up for the first one and he'll start the PowerPoint. And then after the PowerPoint, we'll just kind of sit back and facilitate any questions or anything you have of us and go from there. Thank you.
Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. All right. Just wait for that to load up a little bit and make sure I'm being heard on the microphone because I understand there's somebody at home potentially that we want to make sure we're hearing okay. All right. Well, again, thank you for hosting this meeting, special meeting of Commission and Council in order to have a discussion around the comprehensive plan. We really get excited about this stuff. We've had the fortunate opportunity to work with Cheney over the last year. And it's sort of kicked us off and got us to this space where we're ready to move forward with some consensus with you all. Before I get started, I just want to recognize Curtis Johnson, Associate Planner with Nexus, who has done a lot of the legwork on developing what you see in front of you tonight. I also want to recognize Mackenzie, who is the program manager, director, project coordinator for Cheney's member association. And we've had some great conversation with Mackenzie in terms of where her project and the project with the comprehensive comprehensive plan is aligned with similar values and similar vision. That said, really, I'm going to kind of buzz through this, hoping to take less than the next 10, 15 minutes, and then really open it up to discussion and any fielding any questions or conversation that you would have for us. In terms of an agenda, future land use map, what is it? Why do we care about it? How does it serve us? Future housing needs. Also, again, why is it important? What are the needs in the city of Cheney around housing? Why is community feedback so important? Why do we have, folks here tonight? And why is it important as far as a project that we've made a special emphasis on engaging with community members in a variety of ways, right? Not just one way or the other. And then finally, discussion around a preferred future land use map. So where are we at in the process? This is just for everybody's sake to know that, again, we're about a year out from sort of a draft plan. That said, the sooner we come to consensus around land use, it's really a hub or a sort of a key cornerstone, if you will, of a comprehensive plan, because it really helps set direction for other elements around transportation, around utilities, capital facilities, et cetera. So once we get this piece sort of in the bag, then we really can move forward with some of the other elements. So all of these are simply just to show, plan drafting is occurring as we go. GMA is a requirement of the state of Washington that we ensure that some of the policies reflect those of the state. And then as we go on further on into the next year, we will talk about implementation. Implementation usually includes programming, project budgets, or capital improvement budgets, as well as any changes to development regulations that come out of policy shifts. So future land use map. So, when we talk about the FLUM, future land use map, or sometimes we say the comprehensive plan map, this is a non-regulatory map. So what we're talking about tonight is not regulation. It's not law. It is simply vision. It's simply looking at what do we believe for ourselves and how do we see growth occurring over the next 20 years. And let's encapsulate that in a map. A map is also associated with policies, right? So land use policies, which simply are designations on the map, meaning our current designations, including general residential, multifamily, critical areas, et cetera. How are these working for us? And where do we see possible needed change? So again, it's a policy tool outlining the various locations and intensities of various land uses. So why is it important? As I mentioned before, it really is that cornerstone or that keystone of our project, helping us kind of go forward with transportation, housing, capital facilities, utilities to be able to accommodate that future growth scenario. So what is kind of driving these decisions? Really, it's twofold. One is, what do we hear from the community? So what vision do people have, based on our surveying and our open houses and our attendance at various community events? And then sort of what is the numbers telling us? What is the data telling us regarding sort of needs for growth? In 2021, state of Washington passed House Bill 1220. Some of you know a lot about it. Some of you may know a little bit about it. What that did was require all cities and counties in the state of Washington to look at not only their projected growth in terms of a total number of population over the next 20 years, total number of housing, jobs, et cetera, and plan for that growth. It also asked communities to look at various income segments. And I'll show that. So why is that interesting, or why is that important? Well, if we just look at that total target in terms of how many units for the next 20 years does Cheney need, when we did that math, it shows 2,087. That's total, including existing stock with our total target. And then if we look at the capacity, when we say capacity, we mean the zoned capacity. Meaning, so if you've got single family residential, two family residential, multifamily resident, all of that zone capacity, which allows for growth, what does that give us? So if we just look at that kind of total number, Cheney's in pretty good shape because it's telling us, 97% of capacity versus our target, right? So it's kind of that overarching number. So we would just need to tweak a little bit of the regulation, allow for some additional units, and we've got that total amount. So what 1220 did, like I mentioned, and I'm just going to kind of read you the quote here, signed into law in 2021, updated the Growth Management Act, encouraging communities to consider all economic segments. So it changed the Growth Management Act from encouraging communities to consider economic segments to requiring local government to plan and accommodate housing affordable to all income levels. So why is that important? Because when we look at the breakdown of income levels, it's a different story. In Cheney, when we did the capacity analysis, we looked at folks who are earning that 80 to 120% AMI. This is the three categories of income. So AMI meaning area median income. So the average median income to folks living in Cheney. What type of housing is available to those folks? We see that the 80 to 120%, so that's sort of your medium level, there is sufficient capacity to meet that target. Greater than 120% of AMI, we are sort of marginal or nominal in the capacity required to meet that target. Temporary housing, that's new, and it's included in that House Bill 1220. And that really doesn't have much to do with land use necessarily as it does policy. So what folks and communities throughout the state are able to do to achieve the emergency housing is to arrange agreements, for example, with hotels, right? So we just had a pretty major fire issue last year, sort of getting ahead of that game and figuring out, when and if emergencies occur, how do we manage that? And there's emergency management that can be coordinated regional, but we need to see that in Cheney's policy document, which is the comprehensive plan. So we, working through that. Where the biggest sort of driver of change potentially is in that 0 to 80% of AMI. So we did the analysis. We saw that Cheney had a deficit of 702 housing units. And so that has been a driver of how change needs to occur, or what type of capacity we need to consider. So that's the sort of obligatory or regulatory side of the equation. The other side of the equation is simply, what are we hearing from the community? Back in October, November, we put out the community survey, 349 completed responses. We thought that was a pretty successful response rate. Some of the kind of top line responses around affordable housing, we asked folks, is this policy still important? We reflected on the previous comp plan, suggested, hey, there was a prioritization for affordable housing at that time. Is that still relevant? 91% folks said yes. Similarly to small town feel, leveraging EW. We've got all the results on the website. Feel free to download those and take a look. But why is this important? Because it helped to guide the scenarios that I'm going to explain. So the three scenarios that we sort of proposed, again, not a lot of science to this, really just being creative and taking that information from the 702 units that were required, plus stakeholder interviews, the survey results, conversations with staff, conversations with community members. We looked at what might be a baseline meaning meets the GMA minimum housing target, so that 702 unit, while limiting other changes to land use, proposing what's called a TOD, or transit-oriented development zone, which I know has been a popular idea in Cheney, and proposes improvements to walkability in pedestrian hotspots such as downtown, Highway 902 corridor, shopping center, and around EWU. So this was sort of that baseline. And if you all were at the open house, this is kind of what was presented at that time. And we got feedback around this scenario. Likewise, second scenario, scenario 2, we just called it the baseline plus 20, with 20% additional units um, on top of that 702 number, meets the GMA targets plus additional capacity for middle housing. So middle housing is a concept that has been sort of taking popularity and I think importance around the nation regarding providing capacity and regulatory framework for allowing um, different types of housing, instead of sort of just a single family dichotomy where we've set single family and sort of high density, but try to incentivize more of that middle housing type. Providing additional zone flexibility and HD zones, and increasing height max and mixed use, and proposing TOD to increase to that 1.4 mile radius. So similar to baseline, adding additional provisions. Thirdly, what we're calling the visionary allowable change, providing greatest flexibility, incentivizing infill, sort of redevelopment throughout, creating the sort of a maximum, not a maximum, but a sort of flexible housing unit target. In some communities, they've determined that, hey, we can't just plan for that minimum. We actually have to plan for 20% or 30% greater, just because of market dynamics, that some of these places we're not going to get built. So if we want to see it actually get built, we've actually have to allow for capacity beyond just that minimum baseline. Updates the commercial corridor designation to mixed use, proposes TOD designations, again, increasing housing flexibility in multifamily. So actually taking what's currently existing in multifamily for dwelling units per acre and increases that. So some notes about community involvement or engagement. What did we hear? So we took these scenarios back in December to the workshop, or what we called a vision open house, asked folks to sort of comment on what they were seeing, give us sort of their feedback. We looked at various values, which we sort of heard during those first initial round of orientation interviews or stakeholder interviews, and asked folks to kind of grade the scenarios based on the values that we felt were important for the community. So the results really highlighted that scenario 3 as being the most effective at accomplishing a lot of those values. So fast forward to May, taking that information, distilling that into a preferred scenario. Before we came to you folks, we wanted to kind of vet that to the community. We weren't scientific in the number of participants, but we guesstimate we had about 100 people show up at our booth. And it was really good conversations. People were really receptive to the ideas. And the way that the activity worked was that we asked folks to sort of look at each section of town. So we broke up that scenario 3, visionary scenario, and sort of chunked it up to be able to kind of not just look at it as a big total, but in these certain areas. And we gave them a way to sort of judge whether they liked it or disliked it. And this is sort of the responses that we got. So the main one where we got some feedback was in this section 4, which was sort of the area around the schools. Felt like some of the comments we received asked us to dial back the amount of change that was kind of scheduled or looked at to occur in those areas. So that's what we did. We reflected that in the final preferred scenario that we're showing you tonight. So the map itself, meaning this preferred scenario, when we do the math again on whether we comply, whether we are able to confirm that it meets the requirements of House Bill 1220 and the Growth Management Act, and the answer is yes. So this is the resultant capacity and target results with the final preferred draft scenario. So you can clearly see that 0 to 80% AMI level is facilitated in that. And so I'm going to briefly just kind of point out the changes where things occurred. So we really have kind of three, four-ish locations in Cheney where the future land use map is adjusted. Overall, oh, I really can't see that. Overall, we're encouraging infill through the use of a middle housing designation. What it accomplishes, it encourages infill of vacant and partially developed lots, primarily in the southwest area of Cheney. Provides housing options without disrupting existing neighborhoods. Really is a definition of middle housing, which is sort of house scale buildings, which provide options for multiple units. Why are these areas selected? Well, proximity to commercial corridor, supporting local economy, including the downtown area and our local merchants, promoting downtown walkable neighborhoods, infill development into downtown Cheney. And then there on the southwest side, not only do we suggest additional middle housing provisions, but some of the existing industrial that is sort of laid vacant for a number of years that we look at creating a mixed use environment there to spur on development and support residential adjacent services. So that is all I have.
Ryan, any questions for Ryan? Just for clarification, when you're looking at capacity, you're looking at not just our current stock, but also zoned areas that could be developed, correct?
Exactly. So right now we have
That's
a housing unit stock. And just like you said, maybe, unit properties that are on larger lots that per the existing zoning code would allow for additional units, that is included in the capacity.
but it doesn't necessarily take into account. So for instance, if we have light industrial zoned areas that's unused,
Mhm.
potentially changing that zone.
It doesn't take that into account. The only change, I think the mixed use would account for that either. I think mixed use is thought of as a commercial. Oh, it's accounting for a portion of residential. Okay, yeah. So the change is in that mixed use, yeah,
Okay,
because it's what it's allowed in the zone. So if
gotcha.
residential was allowed in an industrial zone, which I don't believe it is,
But it doesn't preclude somebody coming in to seek a zone change.
we have no way of knowing what that is. So it's
You're working with the playbook you have.
exactly.
Does 1220 prescribe those percentages? I think I understood you saying that. Is that part of the
But it requires the counties to allocate affordable units throughout the county. So it's the counties themselves that say Spokane, this is your target. Medical Lake, Airway Heights, these are your target. Cheney, this is your target.
And just for my own edification, I mean, what do we define as affordable housing? Is it a unit type or is it a fiscal metric, income-based metric based upon the AMI? Is that how?
Mm-hmm. So it's a great question. Statewide, and this is from Department of Commerce, they look at kind of average throughout the state, what constitutes sort of that affordable unit, right? Affordability is 30% of what a household earns, right? And so when they're doing that kind of average look, they're looking at, what is typically affordable to 100% AMI, 120% AMI, and that may look like a single family unit in some communities. But on average, what that affordable unit is at at that AMI of less than 80% is a multifamily unit. And some places have gone to the extent of looking at square footage, and Curtis and some of the team members have done some look on Zillow and rent.com and just looked around Cheney to see what that affordable unit may look like.
But what I heard you say is densification drives down the cost, but that doesn't preclude single family as being affordable, even though law of standards are bigger lots, bigger houses, more expensive.
Correct.
What was the AMI used in this analysis?
So I think the county, they look at their target, allocation. And it's at the county level, it's Spokane County's AMI. Cheney, I want to say is 50 to 60,000.
was 45.
50 to 60,000.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks. Could you put back up the 20-year future land use? And just, for my purposes, and I don't know,
Sorry.
yeah, right there, that's great. The urban growth area. The area designated to the southeast, i.e. wrong side of railroad tracks. And I don't know if this is discussion for the planning commission, eventually city council, that to have some kind of footnote or have that with another slash mark to designate that possibly for relocation, reassignment. I don't know,
Swap.
the swap or many, what do you want, whatever we want to call it, and waiting on the county. But if we don't show it here, maybe that's what our intentions are. It's gonna be froze in place for another 10 years. And it really, I'd like to see something, discussion, for the next year or so to get that designated for, just leave it in the county and look for some other areas that are a lot more hospitable for development, that are on the right side of the railroad tracks and are actually developable. And you said you're working with the county, Todd, or
Yeah, I can kind of answer that.
you're more
question.
man than I am with this.
So, just because of our land quantity analysis, we can project the next 20 years within the current city limits is what we have. What happens is that the county will reevaluate and maybe the UGA goes away. And the question is they're saying there are certain development patterns that will tend to kind of stretch the boundaries of where we're at. So some of the discussions have been creating some type of urban reserve. An urban reserve is, for example, is that when we have agricultural land, on most of that, can we actually identify going out to about 1,000 or 1,500 feet into those areas and identify them as an urban reserve and let the county kind of take a look at their zoning and kind of get set up for more of an urban transition. Right now, we're kind of locked in between agricultural and some of the items down below as far as wetlands and everything that we don't really have. County has never caught up to how we're going to make that transition. So that is what we were locked into, and that kind of identifies also the land swap. Because of the LQA, we have the numbers. So they do recognize development patterns going a certain way. My 2 cents worth is that I think there should be some type of policy that brings our infrastructure to that line and not necessarily jumping within a certain amount. So we do have streets and water at that juncture to that end. Obviously it's a Spokane County decision whether to put it in the UGA. And obviously, if we have grounds in the UGA, it's a council's decision to bring it into the city. So there is to that. But right now, we are working with the county and seeing, what is something like that look like as far as urban, whether that will be brought up in discussion as we move through the comprehensive plan. I know we talked about quite a bit.
No, I understand that. It's all good. I guess, again, just my own opinion. If we don't state our intentions in our plan and show it in there, I don't care what the county does, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. But if we say we don't want it in an urban growth area, you can do a buffer, or we can call whatever you want. We'd much rather go on the other side of the railroad tracks. Boink. And if we don't state it in here, then it's they'll assume that this is still what we want for, you know, growth area. And again, it's up to the planning commission and the city council to kind of see if we could back out of this 20-year-old designation and get with something that is actually what we'd want to do. Because I don't know if anyone supports our urban growth area being where it is there on that side of the tracks.
Yeah, it pretty much locks us into, we can only develop within these bounds because it's just cost prohibitive to develop on that side and it's a liability to the city.
And he's done nothing since except a spattering of things since
Yes.
it was all brought in. And I think in the future for planning commission consideration, whenever there's a development or some sort of extension, we should put a time limit on it. You have not made progress within a certain period of time, 10 years, whatever it is, you know, just state it outright, you are likely to be removed from our growth area. Because, I mean, it's just unfortunate when you have large pieces of property owned by single individuals and they don't move on it. It's pretty difficult for our community to know what's going on. I was curious, is this approach that the Spokane County is taking the approach that is being taken all across the state? This changing of language of what the urban growth area is and
I did not ask that question, but it's definitely being talked about as far as the county goes.
Spokane,
To that.
our county, but is it the way other counties are?
Yeah, there's new legislation that the Department of Commerce is sort of working out the guidance on. And because, you know, this is a county driven effort and some counties, you know, more urban counties, so this becomes a very real, you know, need because they're bumping up against each other and services and infrastructure are bumping up against each other. What we know from Spokane County is they're also doing their land capacity analysis to suggest where urbanization may occur. We haven't been in those particular conversations, and you all are doing your best to say, hey, this is not the pattern of growth that we want to see. And that really needs to be reflective of things on different. So there in the county can respond to geez, desire for certain growth pattern.
You are uncomfortable putting things on that we've approved that the county hasn't. I would suggest we put it on and say pending. Just put it on the map.
Let's take it like.
It's pending. So that they are aware that we've passed it. It's pending county, Spokane County, you're going.
There would also be, just because of agricultural land, there's certain growth patterns, and we can get you that information where we should consider some growth patterns, because what takes it away from us right now is that when you talk about infill, there is hardly any. I think there's one 40-acre piece left in this area. Well, excuse me, at least on that side of the tracks, there's some larger tracks there. But when you talk about larger tracks and somebody wanting to develop within that area, we've taken away these large developments, a lot of infill. So I will offer you this. My last conversation with Spokane County, they said they would be willing to come out here and do an informational item, whether that be for planning or council, to kind of talk about their process and everything else. So I will offer that invitation.
Are these checkered areas that we're showing in the UGA, is that? First of all, I think I heard you say they're going away, but in terms of the county zoning, are they actually zoned agriculture or urban reserve as it stands right now?
It's conservation reserve. There's some agriculture up above the way, and then there's some rural tradition all around. So I think that when you take a look at a lot of the south, and a big chunk of that is the city wetlands, you know, to that end. That one was just kind of drawn out. So really to that, pretty much more of the southwest is more of the individual properties. A large portion of that, it does include the wastewater treatment wetlands.
So is it also safe to presume in the other areas around the city where we're not hatched, that that's just designated agricultural land?
No, not down there. It's more conservation, type land.
I mean, like north and.
Oh, yeah,
and
north.
West.
Yeah, so when you take a look at that hatched area right at 904 and Betts, that is rural tradition, but the reality of it, that is a kind of a circular farmland. It does have irrigation circles, to that end. And I think where the growth pattern we've had over the years is pretty much when you talk about Harvest Bluff and then moving beyond Harvest Bluff is when you get into that more that agricultural.
I guess what I'm really asking is it more than just changing hatches on a map? Is there zoning changes that have to go along with trying to move the UGA or urban reserve or whatever it's called now?
Well, so the urban reserve, I think is just, they're going to extend it because the county needs to, I think what you're calling urban reserve is allowing the county to assess where our growth patterns or our development patterns are happening.
Well, they have zoning designations, and Ron, you can help me if I'm wrong, but they actually, within those UGAs, they have an urban
Yeah.
reserve designation that goes along with the hatching.
Platter.
I guess what I'm trying to ask though is if this is gonna be moved around, is there zoning that has to be fought for as well? Or chicken and egg, get the comprehensive plan first, then you follow with zoning, so on and so forth?
I think if you were to take a look at an urban reserve or recommended urban reserve around the city, then that would put the county to say, where do we designate this more of an urban reserve? Now, they're cautioning us to say agriculture, some of the agriculture is prime, but can they accept so much, especially if it's running right off our urban? So as of now, nothing has been changed from the county to say this is urban reserve. And I don't believe they call that lower part urban reserve. I think it's still within that rural.
Anybody else? Vince?
I did have a question about, I know we've been talking about UGAs. Well, I'll touch on the UGA first, I guess. I always thought that the UGA had to be justified and was tied to a 20-year need. Is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, that Spokane County, because of our land quantity analysis, says that, if it moves forward, that we're not tapping into our UGA. We're not planning to that end because we're infilling. But there's certain growth patterns and there's certain needs from other jurisdictions to say, hey, what happens if we lock in at 20% and somebody comes in? So that's a discussion. It is not approved, it's only a discussion base, and I don't think it's part of that. I don't believe it's part of the discussion on urban reserve.
So again, that's a county level
Yeah.
conversation, and I wouldn't, they're bound by statute, which requires them to determine, the extent at which there's a justifiable quantity or capacity analysis to upzone certain areas. Where there's a strange contradiction is in Cheney's urban growth areas. That 20 years ago should have been designated urban densities, right? So county and UGAs, typically you'll see, 5-to-1 sort of densities, five units per acre, or some sort of kind of suburban density. And geez, we don't have that. We've got all kinds of critical areas that need to be protected that should have never been, in my opinion, should never have been in an urban growth area to begin with, because they're not, you can't develop as urban.
Thank you. I guess my other question, switching gears to the unit capacity. We talked a little bit about the emergency housing and being temporary. Do we know if the House bill sets a threshold on what emergency housing, like, does it need to be 800 square feet? Does it need to be 1,200 square feet? And the reason I'm asking, I think we talked a little bit about this in Public Works, or can ADUs fill that need for the emergency housing?
So to answer your question, no, 1220 does not, it's not explicit in what that really means. And to be honest, we've done some research and we've talked to other jurisdictions, and the way that, the West Side jurisdictions that have all had their due dates come and go for comp plans, and looking at examples of how they're accomplishing their emergency housing need, and it's really programmatic and it's really custom to those local communities to say, how do we feel like we're going to be able to address that? So if City of Cheney wanted to talk to neighbors that had ADUs or even in our policy suggest, we would encourage neighbors to open up their accessory units as available to be used in terms of emergency. That's really the level that we're seeing of other communities. Oftentimes it's some kind of MOU with the hotels that says if we have an emergency, they would allow people to stay there.
Got one more. I'm just gonna keep rolling here, buddy. Sorry. So Councilman Barthels had asked a question that made me wonder, it precipitated that, you have to demonstrate a need for a UGA area, right? Is that what I heard said? So if we're showing on this map that pretty much all of the housing target can be accommodated within pretty much existing city limits, does that lose our ability to have these urban reserve zones if it's establishing a need that says once upon a time we thought they'd need this, but now we're showing everything being contained? Does the county say, well, maybe we're going to pull some of those dashed or checkered areas off the table because obviously you don't need it? Does that preclude us grabbing some of that back someday?
So the way I understand the county's process is that they are doing their own capacity analysis and they take the inputs from the jurisdictions to suggest, hey, here's, what we are considering as a jurisdiction. But they have their own requirements in the UGAs, which is what they govern, right? So they have to consider the total county urban growth areas for Spokane and the Valley and Liberty Lake and Airway Heights and take those into their capacity analysis and determine whether they can accommodate the demand for those affordable units within that, those spaces of urban incorporated, urban county, urban unincorporated areas. So you're asking whether there's a relationship. And my understanding is no, there is not a relationship because we are responsible for the big black line that goes around our city limits. So anything within our incorporated area of the city. Do you have a justification for requesting amendments to the urban growth area? Yes, because you're the urban service provider. So the urban service provider, if there's patterns of growth that are more feasible for the service provider to grow, say to the north, I think there's justification to put that in a policy, AKA your comprehensive plan. So the county has that information. So when they go to do their UGA discussions, they will know that this is the policy of this particular jurisdiction.
I think I'm hearing you say included on the map so they know of the city's future intentions. Is that what I heard? Pretty much. Well, no.
That's my recommendation, to be able to accommodate the type of, righting some of the past wrongs and also look at the future of Cheney, because this is your community, right? So, we're beholden by the methodology for land capacity analysis or land quantity analysis that Commerce, and this is the result of that. It doesn't allow us, unless we don't have capacity within our existing boundaries, doesn't allow us to suggest, it allows us to suggest, it doesn't allow us to modify because we're not in the driver's seat of that urban growth area.
I heard.
First thing is the county is incorporating, the UGA includes city limits. So when the county does their LCA, it'll include the city and then whatever is to be approved UGB, urban growth boundary. The second thing is, like Ryan, you were saying, the city, the collaboration starts with, well, we have reasonable service connection to these areas. And if the LCA says, hey, we need this much for Cheney's UGA, that's the first data point. The second data point is, can that jurisdiction, Cheney, Airway Heights, whoever, can they reasonably connect city services, urban services to that area? So like you were saying, these suggestions could, from Cheney could be, it's not that feasible, or maybe it's more feasible to connect it to another area. Does that make sense? Sorry, I just went ahead of two.
Yeah, and if I could just add on, I think what you're hearing is that I think we need to be we need to be in the driver's seat here, Cheney. We know best how to grow our city. Correct me if I'm wrong. And how do we communicate that to the county so they know where we want to go as a city? So, you know, just like Bill was saying, all this land down here that's not developable, why is it even in our growth boundary that should go somewhere else? So how do we do that?
Yeah, so we're, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dichotomy for us because we're really supporting you in your comprehensive plan per the framework that we're given. That whole other side of the house of, you know, how do we advocate, you know, an urban growth area modification or swap? I know that's one of the pieces of legislation that came out in 23, I believe, was there's opportunities for swapping with other, and again, we're not in those conversations. So I couldn't really advise you on that, but in particular, the area that we are sort of analyzing or study area, which is the city limits, this helps to kind of guide a vision for what could be possible within our.
I also heard you say that X is less than Y, meaning to show a push somewhere else, we couldn't have had the capacity within our boundaries now to accommodate the target, right?
With the
If we
zone.
would have been bigger, then we could justify growing in different areas. But because we're less than, we can accommodate that within city limits, our hands are a little bit tied on pushing these boundaries somewhere. Is that what I heard you say?
Our hands, depending on the type of development. So again, we're looking at those affordable units. So if there was some justification to say we cannot get affordability unless it was
Have more area.
out in this area, then that certainly is an argument that could be made.
Next, quick clarifying question. So, on one of the earlier slides, you said that we're at 97% capacity versus target. Is that based on this map or is that based on our current zoning?
It's based on current zoning.
Okay, so this, based on current zoning, we're at 97%. Does this account for that other 3%?
Yeah. So the numbers I showed you before with the deficit, that's current.
Okay.
So the 1866 was the total target on the 80%, 0 to 8% AMI. I'm sorry, 1686. And so we were at a deficit in our current zone capacity. So when we take the preferred, you know, recommended or draft preferred scenario, we crunch the numbers again. This is what it shows, meaning we are in excess capacity.
By rezoning certain areas.
By adding a middle housing designation. Yeah.
So like the one on the west side of town, like that's where I live. So where do you see there being space to add middle housing to an existing single family neighborhood?
So it's
Without amending this.
it's zone capacity, right? So it's taking the ability, right? So what could be legally built in that area. I mean, there's different ways of, you know, cutting the cat or whatever. Like there's different ways of slicing this up. You know, we could just look at existing high density zoned areas and adding, you know, additional density. Will those ever develop? The likelihood is most likely no, because a lot of it's already been built out. So there's ways of, you know, which is kind of why we're in this conversation, right? Because it's not just a, you know, easy fix. It's something that has to be customized to the needs of the community. And so that's where we juxtapose community engagement and folks telling us, right? We want affordability, but we also want our downtown, you know, to have vitality and the ability to, you know, attract more customers. So to answer your question, where do we see middle housing being developed? It's not because there's a swath of vacant land, right, that it's all going to happen overnight. what it is a policy decision that you get to make of where does that additional capacity happen.
But then if it's not developable because it's already an existing neighborhood, like, how does that factor into our numbers? If
Sure.
we create a policy that, yes, we can put things there and we can rezone it, but if we can't ever actually develop it without having like half my neighborhood sell their homes, where do we accommodate the
So,
extra
so
housing?
additional density doesn't need to be, a complete, demolish or whatever, redevelopment, allowing for ADUs. We talk about ADUs, that's included in this, additional attached, dwelling units or even further subdivision of units, unless, depending on the size, right? I've just drove around these areas on the way out here, and there are areas that, they have smaller houses and larger lots, which have the potential of further subdivision or further units. Again, there's not a perfect location for this to occur. It's what really made sense, when we asked folks, what do you envision and where do you envision these things to occur?
That then be used for justification though, for amending that urban boundary to actually feasibly accommodate some of these more dense housing. We
Again,
can't build it on the south side. We can't even build
Again-
single-family homes down there. Like,
mhm. Again, that would suggest in those particular areas that would be considered that they would be zoned accordingly to allow for affordability.
A quick question. Todd, if you could help me out. Yeah. So we're showing a deficit in primarily the middle housing. Is that, it's kind of what's happening right now? And so it's always interesting as far as being a service provider, then we'll need to make, if this comes to fruition next year, whatever, and then take a look at our 5 or our 10-year water and wastewater plans and make, then to update them accordingly.
Well, there's two factors to it, obviously, so when you take a look at the center section of town, we have what we consider single family residents in R3. And then somebody would come in and say, well, they may never even add to their house, but they put apartment units inside the building and nothing ever changes on the outside. But there is a certain density to that, whether it's, 20 units per acre, which amounts to about 1 unit every 2,200 square feet. So we don't put 20 units on that one little area. We have that calculation. But to Paul's point, if we were to expand some of those areas right now, those are single family, some are duplexed in there. And then there's a little bit of vacant land. But when you take a look at that, if they change over to units, they're going to have to pay an extra capacity charge, which we will either pump the water or receive the water. Okay, that's already in place. But the bigger question is, if the potential maximum in those areas take our infrastructure and need it upsized, more fire hydrants, taking a look at the transportation network to where we need more, facility. We haven't got there yet. We're just asking tonight to say, okay, if we take a look at that, that's where we start crunching the concurrency out and start saying, does this apply? Does it become too spendy? And over that time, is it, can you make a justification for maybe finding more vacant land or to that end? So I don't know if that answers your question, Paul, but we're not quite on the crunching of the
No,
numbers.
yeah, no, it does. I'm just saying, we have to keep in mind that we can color the maps and we have deficits with regard to housing. We need to keep in mind that that needs to then require update of our utility plans to accommodate that. And then lastly, just as a comment, that farthest little wing on the southeast, that's showing that as industrial. I guess that's because it's no, on that way as far southeast part of town as you can go on the other side of Mullinex.
Oh,
That's because that's adjoining industrial, and I guess that would be an island if we tried to tag it with some other future land use, wouldn't it?
that's a good point. I mean, that is a large section of vacant land.
Yeah, that to me is more appropriate for multifamily than it is industrial. I think we got too much industrial, to be honest with you. If that's something to be considered as well.
Everything can be, the point is to get like some comments and we can make changes to the map as needed. So yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. And this is, by the way, all land use. So it's not zoning.
Right,
And
right.
I'm not sure what the zoning is on that, but yeah, that's a great point. I even just jotted it down that, yeah, that things can change.
Transit can relocate, but at this point, we're talking about high density in areas that transit does not exist, and the two really need to be hand in hand.
If you remember, that was annexed years ago, this pie in the sky plan, he had it all. I was trying to plat that, what Todd was,
It was platted for lots for industrial type development.
was it industrial? Okay. Well, anyhow, it's something to consider. That'd be a nice place for multifamily.
Can I also just kind of piggyback on what Paul mentioned earlier about the water? Not only would we need updates to the infrastructure, but I know there was a study done almost 20 years ago now at this point on the health of the aquifer, because like we sit on an isolated perched aquifer. Do we know, like, do we have enough water or the capacity to address the influx or infill that were projected over the next?
Yeah, I
20
mean,
years?
we get a check on our water system plan update and we call them equal residential units based on the capacity. We have a 6-year and 20-year plan based on that. What really throws our ERUs out of whack is what we're seeing right now is heavy irrigation. So we're trying to mitigate that with our reuse and trying to draw that down. But the report that Buchanan had over 20 years ago was, yeah, we are mining water. It's not just an aquifer over Cheney, it's a bigger region.
Exactly.
So-
We've got all the agriculture that
Mhm.
they have priority water rights in a lot of places.
Yeah,
And we've got prolonged drought and fires. So how has that affected the quantity as well as the quality of water that we have available to us?
so our last water system plan update was I think in 2020. And so I think we're on a 10-year plan, so we'll be revisiting that. But as far as that goes, we had plenty of ERUs. We expanded our wastewater treatment plant back in 2011. Unless there's something drastic, obviously you need to take a look at the well drawdowns and the data drawdowns is what we have. So non-irrigation season, all of our levels in the aquifer come up, and then we are not pulling them down through the winter time. Hardly running maybe 2 to 3 wells. Right now, we have all wells full blasted.
I'm just curious what the overall drawdown has been over that course of 20 years. Because again, we've been in a prolonged drought this whole time, so evaporation is greater than precipitation.
What else is on your mind? A lot of time for discussion for the next year and kind of coming to how do we really want this to look, to send the right message on how Cheney needs to grow smartly going forward.
Correct. Yeah. And really what we're trying to do right now is just saying, okay, based on, the surveys, the public input and everything else, and scenario 3, does this look like kind of a consensus so we can start pulling those numbers, keeping in mind the suggested tonight, and then also asking those questions. Like we can, with our GIS, we could probably pull and kind of identify where our infrastructure touches, the boundaries of our city limits, how that works, and kind of give you an idea if you want to entertain what we call an urban reserve to their end.
I guess just another general comment. I know you touched on the TODs. We talked about that in a subcommittee, and one of the things we talked about is maybe trying to create a new TOD right at the library and across at the mill. And it'd be interesting in a future meeting, maybe just to kind of show an exhibit that shows where they could be located. But I think that would be a great location right there for one.
Yeah, definitely. Taking notes. I just want to comment on the utilities, because that came up in the Growth Management Act in capital facilities planning, which is capital facilities is a element of the comprehensive plan. It requires that jurisdictions look at their land use plan and determine whether the land use changes that are potentially envisioned can be capacitated or facilitated with our utility, not just water, utilities, electrical, transportation, but even school district, fire district, fire department, police department, all of our service can. And if they can't, if it's determined either they can't through as existing or a future expansion or a new facility, we have to determine whether we can pay for that if we need that. And if they can't, then the GMA requires that we take another look at our land use assumptions and modify that to ensure that we can create concurrency, is which the 25-cent word is for that.
So Department of Fish and Wildlife has somebody whose whole job is to work with municipalities to make sure that they're meeting the GMA requirements for the environmental stuff. Have we had any conversations? I believe Garrett is their name.
Yep. We had Garrett reached out, which was great. And we had a great conversation. They provided a lot of resources to us. They are very specific to habitat protection. When
Because we've got all the conservation land on the south.
Yep. And they provided us some great resources, and we're working with them on the critical areas checklist, because there's a critical areas checklist that they share with all jurisdictions to ensure that we are not just complying, but looking at priority habitats and priority habitat corridors and seeing how, seeing where there's opportunity not only just for regulatory mitigation, but also voluntary mitigation.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if we're at a point where we make this decision, but are you looking for direction on each one of these scenarios and which way we want to go?
Yeah, that this looks appropriate. I don't know, I'm not asking for additional.
Okay.
If we're gonna spend a lot of time and money,
Yeah.
Results are, numbers change direction.
So
Doesn't that come up
Can I-
to the planning commission and the council for direction? Or
would.
do you-
Yeah.
Would you want to have that, I guess?
Yeah, I think we start planning to that end, and hopefully we'll be meeting or having a monthly planning commission as we kind of move forward to that end. So what the scenario is proposing, you have three scenarios in front of you, and this is the scenario 3. Does it look feasible? Is this something that we need to kind of run through and have more discussion on a planning commission or council? But
Gives us the most flexibility.
yeah, this one gives us the most flexibility, to that end.
So you're looking for that tonight, or did you want to start that with the planning commission and council?
I think we're hoping to get the consensus, but it's up to you if you want.
Be wonderful. Like I said, like Todd said, we are on a schedule and want to make sure that we're running through. There's no official action that we're asking for. Official action will come through, like you mentioned.
Oh, I would just say, I would really like those 2 pending areas, the land swaps. That both city council and planning commission have approved, as well as the county planning commission have approved the 10-acre land swaps, and I would like those to go on the map and have them say pending, so that as this guy. Councilman Schmidt said, I'm getting old. Councilman Schmidt said, maybe also what we want gone pending, even though we haven't voted on it, or some other language potentially that we can, it seems only logical to have those on there, since they have been for us approved and moved on to the next step.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, again, it's been kind of a focal point tonight, but the urban growth area thing it's time to make our intentions known. Otherwise, we're tacitly approving, again, another 10-year plan with that hashed area that isn't really what, I don't, and that's again, what the planning commission and council can make that as a formal. I don't have a problem with the rest of it. I think you've done well. I don't, you know, as long as we're in compliance with state law and everything's consistent and see any issues, maybe we can start tweaking some of the areas that said all industrial, you might want to convert to something else, but this is a pretty good starting point based on all the input you've already received from the community.
So I think what we'll do is inside the bold lines, we'll kind of proceed through taking notes on the industrial side clear to the southwest, but we'll also take a look at what we have as far as the pending land swap areas. And then also I will give you some other locations where we do have infrastructure to it. I have talked to property owners that want to be considered for future. So, and we have some that don't want us to be considered for future. So
They might want to reconsider. I don't.
Yes, just to reiterate, I think our lands analysis does say that we have enough capacity within our city limits. I'd like to kind of see the focus on that. I think there's value in infill. And it's not gonna hurt my feelings if the UGA goes away. I don't know that we can justify the UGA. So, and as I previous said, I don't know that I support any pending UGA shift. So.
Thing about infill is, well, I've been looking on Zillow lately and the one lots in Cheney are, $130,000. Who's gonna buy a lot in Cheney for $130,000? Then they have to tear down a home. And then, and all of that expense happens before you can actually begin to build your $400,000+ home. I think it's a great goal, but in reality, it has limitations on and not just limitations on financially, but also on the style of neighborhood that can be built. All you can do is add, you're not creating any differentness that allows people to select different housing choices and neighborhood choices and things like that. But also just the money. I've even driven around town and looked at plots and I'm like, yeah, just too much work here maybe if some giant fire came through and burned it down.
But isn't that what we're endorsing tonight? I mean, what I understand by moving forward with this map is we're basically setting up maps and policies that say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, adding to homes or renting out part of your home as an accessory dwelling unit or adding accessory dwelling units. I'm not seeing, and again, I'm all for transit orientated development. I love that, traditional neighborhood developments, densification, but right now what this is saying is we're moving forward with densification as our main driver for housing growth within Cheney. Cheney, I think of EWU, but I also think of families and I think of kids. There's a person that put a rope between two trees in my yard and they do the tightrope walk every single day. That kind of precludes some of that with the plan I'm understanding right now. So basically we're saying, let's densify. And I get the state's kind of dictating how we're doing that, right? I get that. But at the same token, if we're saying, yep, let's go forward with this map, we've kind of checkmated ourselves because we're creating policy and maps that endorse just that. That's what I'm seeing here. I mean, agreed. But
it's also being prescribed by 1220. I mean, our hand is being forced that.
Oh, I understand. Amending the UGA gives us a little more flexibility in where we can put the density. So while this suggests zoning changes, if we can amend our potential boundary or where future growth is anticipated, then not everybody in my neighborhood has to rent out their basement or put in an ADU.
I heard him say that the supply and demand analysis is done within city boundaries. X is less than Y. So there's no reason for the county to consider going outside the boundary.
But it's not feasible. necessarily, like, it's not guaranteed that we're gonna get that level of infill into these areas just by designating them those zones.
So about 10 years.
And then where are we?
That's what I'm saying is,
We're in the same spot.
is now the time we draw a line in the sand and say, okay, we can get affordable housing by trying to put something else other than basements, to your point, in housing. I mean, is this the point where we say, maybe we need to push the limits a little bit? And I don't know how to do that. Maybe you do. So
Yeah, I think that's a UGA conversation with the county. We can draw those lines around it, but the county is really the one that would take the analysis of what we have so far and say where would be the justification to that end. So I think that would still have to be a continuum.
So, Todd, what I guess I'm saying is we've come up with a methodology that says we're gonna get to 2,000 homes by stuffing four units on a lot. We have to say that, Ryan, or do we say the methodology should be changed a little bit now to show we need a little bit more in land?
So again, it goes back to that AMI, that those income bands. So middle housing is what some call a gentle density approach, right? I mean, we could, like I said, we could carve out some areas for additional high density if that was of interest of the community to say, all we're gonna do is we're gonna get our 700 units by carving out additional high density and see, large apartment complex. But that's not what we heard from the community. When we asked folks, how do we want to accomplish this? We heard values about keeping small town community feel, access to merchants and downtown and encouraging downtown economic development.
How are we keeping small family feel with 6 units on an acre?
So middle housing goes back to, its form, right? It's not necessarily function of the density. It's the form of the unit. So examples being a single family that may have been converted
I get
into.
all of it. Methodology that basically prescribes everything and the answer is forced upon us almost. So I guess I'm the only one concerned about that. So that's, I mean, yeah, I get it, but if I will be quiet if everybody's understanding it except for me, I guess. So
I think there are still people who are going to want a little larger lot than their neighbor, and so that they can put swing set and boats in the backyard and whatever else they need to do.
yeah, but this isn't showing any of that, and we're getting sandwiched into policies that dictate this is where we develop. That's my concern. Please help me understand.
So right now, we're looking at the future land use map. And the policies will later on, outside of tonight's conversation, will include changing around some densities in already high density multifamily and allowing for expanding. So right now, along downtown, all along 904 from where we are right now, all the way down that way, includes on the land use map, mixed use. And so what that would require for us, and it doesn't just have to be middle housing, this would also be adding to the housing allocation, would be changing zoning, not the land use, but the zoning part of it along downtown to say, well, this is going to be mixed use as well. Because right now, if you look on the map, you can look at it close on the printout. All that you can do for mixed use is in the red areas, which is the downtown. So what you can do is what you'd be asking, like policy year from now, would be to increase those possibilities for density in high density multifamily and then multifamily, but then also say, hey, you should be an allowable use to have this height, this many units, or not even a density thing, to say, hey, you can do residential uses in a downtown or like a general commercial zone, if that makes sense. So the middle housing, this is all adjustable. We can go bigger, we can go less, but what that would then mean is that we would go bigger on the allowable amount of units in high density multifamily and mixed use.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, but it all starts right here with these blue
The
areas.
blue areas though are the only thing that's changing. Everything else later. So if let's say everyone here just says, yes, we agree, put stamp on it, and then me and Ryan and the rest of the team start writing policies, we can then comment on what the policies do. Tonight, it's just what's changing from the existing land use map to the future land use.
Proposed.
Yeah.
I get all of it. I really, really do. But again, I think what everybody's missing is this sets the tone for those policies and for the zoning changes and everything else, unless I'm just not getting it. So I thought I get it,
They still have to go through committee and then council for final approval.
but you're blessing them to move forward with this map now as is.
No, we asked for amendments to this map, I thought.
Well, and there's a lot of opportunity in that far north blue dot, blue square, blue, not square, blue shape. There's some empty land back there and so there's, yeah,
Don't take any, I'll let the clock ride out.
No, no action here, just a consensus that this is where we want, this is kind of a starting point for us, I think, moving forward.
One more thing.
Because I think, like I was talking earlier, is there's plenty of light industrial land in Cheney that's unused and there doesn't feel like it's ever gonna be used as light industrial. That could potentially be residential, whether that's high density, low density, whatever, just. So,
For me, the dark blue is redevelopment potential. And I think it's good. And then to your point and Paul's earlier point, there's a lot of industrial in the, what is that, the southwest zone that maybe we need to start looking at now and changing the color of the map now.
So there's the two changes that are being proposed here are middle housing and mixed use. And so where that mixed use designation is changing the baseline, which is industrial. So if you saw that, there's an opportunity to expand additional mixed use or even middle housing area, then that's a conversation that you all could have and direct your consultant to look at.
For now, it's this map, it's not three, we're moving ahead with.
Again, consensus and, I'm hearing a lot of, ideas and we will certainly take all of that into consideration. And sort of modify or reduce or change. It really is, I think something important that we just, acknowledge sort of what it is that we have available to us in terms of policy tools, right? At UGA expansion is one of those policy tools. Densification or middle housing is another policy tool, creating that flexible options. It's nothing changing overnight, right? This is that 20-year vision. No one's going to tell somebody they have to redevelop their single family. And like I said earlier, some communities have actually overshot their capacity and said, we only need X, but we're gonna do X times 20 times 30% because we know a lot of this potentially may not get developed in the future. So, we feel like this is what we're offering here is a bit of a balance to all of those kind of competing interests and those competing ideas while trying to accomplish some of the other policy objectives around economic development, walkability, healthy lifestyles, transit-oriented design. The list goes on.
please, yeah,
Go ahead.
absolutely.
Community development, improving businesses downtown. Got all the red area right there. Really does align with, so I did mention at the beginning that I'm a board member of CMA, but I also am the project coordinator of Community Heart and Soul, which is a program where we are aiming to revitalize Cheney in a way that I think really aligns with what Ryan's goal is here. And I just wanted to, as like the outsider's perspective, let you guys know that does have an interest and wants the best for Cheney, just like I do. I was born and raised in Cheney. Community development is very important to me, and I do think that it's important to hear out that this is just the beginning stages of what there is to come, which is why we are so thankful for your feedback. That's also something that's very similar to what I'm doing with my nonprofit is it's community driven framework. We want to hear from you guys. We want to know what you like, what you don't like, and then we will make adjustments from there. So we don't want you to think that here's this map and this is what's gonna happen in 20 years. And just because there's an okay right now, that doesn't mean we're gonna take this map and run with it. So there will be collaborations with nonprofits in the community. We will be discussing, how this can improve, how we can tie in the university and connect the agricultural aspects of the community together along with the locals. So it's all about coming to an agreement that everyone is going to be as happy as they can, right? So I just noticed that some people maybe thought one way or another, but generally speaking, we want it to be a consensus. We want everyone in the community to be as on board with things as possible, because the ultimate goal is to make Cheney a better place. So.
Vince, go ahead.
I got one more comment. In this report, one of the policy considerations that was mentioned, Ryan, removing parking minimums citywide. I think that could be pretty problematic for our community. I would not advocate removing parking minimums. completely.
Okay.
I mean, we have to deal with snow removal, and the reality is most people that live here have cars. So
Commuters.
Heard. Yep.
We have taken that out.
you have taken that out.
Yeah, scenario 1, 2, and 3 is the previous. Only thing that we're considering going forward is this, and the policies that we have in mind.
Okay, sorry, I was just reading on page
Oh, I know,
11.
yeah,
This is an
yeah.
older, gotcha.
And that gets tackled sort of at that development regulation step.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I just had a final question, but could,
Please.
Todd, on this lavender piece, the Louis Nelson property, that's mixed use. Has that been designated as mixed use this whole time?
No, light industrial.
That's a kind of in that area. You're right, it's kind of been charted out.
So that's another one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I was.
We should
thinking.
take a look at that. Probably right on 904, you could have a strip of something, but behind that, to me, would be residential. And I don't know what we mean by mixed use, but the lavender,
Yeah, next
The
to the
Louis
industrial
Nelson.
park.
yeah,
That's on the existing, so.
yeah, but again, that's potential for discussion that, I mean, it's one of the few flat places we have in Cheney. Yeah, it's not, basalt or,
Protected wetlands.
but, that's another one that if we fill up the blue with, 10 per acre, that might be another one that we could take a look at from lesser density.
So just filling in that corner with the new mixed use development, because the corner is cut out. I wasn't sure, we weren't sure if that was included or, something. So
Adjacent.
Yes. Yeah, put it back in.
Yep.
This piece here, I don't recall.
Guess some of it.
Oh, yeah, that's that. So that one, I thought.
LLC owns the rest.
Yeah.
Nobody-
that's a house right there right now. That's the farmhouse.
That's fire department.
Yeah, this one could be looked at on something else and even.
Oh, no.
That's not.
No,
That's what I took down.
Yeah, that could be another one that we could. Play
Yeah,
around.
the far edge of the blue and yellow, that's Crescent.
I'm good. I'm done.
Yeah, this is Presley. Cool. Good discussion. Just the beginning, right?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you all very much for bringing in your, get all the hard work that's gone into this. And again, we're gonna be very receptive to the work that you've done and look forward to moving forward with you guys. Todd, is there any final words? Are we good?
This was good. Good discussion, but we will, my goal is not to just send in and give you several chapters. We're hoping to spoon feed, as we move through the year. Each chapter, taking the planning commission, updating the council, and allowing for public comments as we move forward. So.
Happening going next meeting.
Yeah, the next meeting, since we're kind of infilling some vacancies and everything else, I think what we'll do is we'll just take the comments, maybe revise a little bit of the maps based on what we heard here, and then we will move forward probably in the September planning commission meeting where we're at and what we're, on what we've come up so far. So, and whether Ryan will be here, I'll just kind of carry the torch. That way they don't have to charge us time for that.
Have a educational section, part of it. Brief everyone, like getting members.
So we're gonna,
Yep.
Box, you know, before.
have 2 members here pretty soon, actually.
We'll get all those onboarding and ready to roll. So.
Thank you for your time on a Monday afternoon, evening. So I appreciate it. Thanks, Todd and your team. Appreciate it. We are adjourned or concluded.
So the city website said the meeting started at 6 o'clock. So when did it actually start?
30.
Right at 5:30.
Yeah, so I double checked it while I was at work. Then I have access to my email.
Yeah.
What I looked at said 6.
What's that?
This meeting? Yeah, workshop.
Yeah, it's on May 4th.
Oh, that's
Click on the
planning.
calendar, it said 5:30.
Yeah. it's- Perfect.
It was definitely, it was one of those, I gotta, got to work, and speed it up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna feed myself.